We humans have a peculiar habit of complicating things, don't we? We tie ourselves in knots over the most trivial matters, create mountains out of molehills, and generally get ourselves into a right old tizzy over. Well, practically nothing at all. Let's pause for a moment and consider. What if the very simplicity of this idea is precisely what makes it so powerful? What if, in our relentless pursuit of depth and meaning, we've overlooked the profound wisdom that often lies right on the surface? Do you see, ignore a smile, and move on isn't just a catchy phrase. It's a philosophy, a way of being, a lens through which we can view the world and our place in it. It's an invitation to step back from the incessant chatter of our minds, the endless drama of our daily lives, and reconnect with the fundamental flow of existence. Let's break it down, shall we? First, we have ignore. Now, this isn't about burying our heads in the sand or pretending that problems don't exist. Far from it. It's about recognizing that much of what occupies our minds, much of what we fret and fuss over, is simply not worth our energy. It's about discernment, about choosing wisely where we place our attention. Think about it. How much of your day is spent worrying about things that never come to pass? How much mental real estate do you give to petty grievances, imagined slights, or future scenarios that exist only in your mind? We're like squirrels, constantly gathering and hoarding nuts of worry and anxiety, as if stockpiling them will somehow protect us from the uncertainties of life. But there's a kicker. Life is uncertainty. The future is always unknown. And no amount of worrying or planning can change that fundamental fact. So when we say ignore, what we're really saying is let go. Release your grip on the illusion of control. Stop trying to micromanage the universe. Now, this might sound scary at first. After all, we've been conditioned to believe that if we're not constantly vigilant, constantly planning and preparing, everything will fall apart. But I invite you to consider, what if the opposite is true? What if, by releasing our stranglehold on life, we actually allow it to flow more freely? This brings us to the second part of our mantra. Smile, the simple act of smiling. It's remarkable, isn't it? Such a small movement of muscles, yet it has the power to transform our entire experience of life. When we smile, we're not just changing our facial expression. We're changing our internal state. We're signaling to our body and mind that despite whatever circumstances we find ourselves in, we choose joy. Now I can almost hear some of you thinking, but Alan, surely you're not suggesting we smile in the face of genuine hardship or tragedy, and you're right to question. We're not talking about a forced, fake positivity that denies the reality of pain or suffering. That would be just another form of ignorance, wouldn't it? No. The smile we're talking about is deeper than that. It's a smile that comes from a place of understanding, of acceptance. It's a smile that says, yes, this moment might be challenging, but I am more than this moment. I'm part of a vast, interconnected dance of existence, and this too shall pass. You see, when we truly understand the nature of reality, its impermanence, its constant flux, we realize that to resist what is futile. It's like trying to hold back the tide with our bare hands. So, instead of resistance, we choose acceptance. On from acceptance flows a natural genuine. This smile is an acknowledgement of the cosmic joke, the divine play of which we are all a part. It's a recognition that in the grand scheme of things, our personal dramas and concerns are both infinitely important and utterly insignificant. It's a paradox, yes, but life is full of paradoxes, isn't it? This brings us to the final part of our mantra. Move on. Now, this might seem at odds with the idea of acceptance we just discussed. After all, if we're accepting what is, why do we need to move on? But you see, moving on is not about escaping or avoiding. It's about, in nature, nothing stands still. Rivers don't stop flowing, planets don't cease their orbits, and the seasons continue their eternal dance. Everything is in constant motion, constant transformation, and we as part of nature are no different. To move on is to align ourselves with this natural flow of life. It's to recognize that every moment is new, fresh, unprecedented. It's to let go of our attachment to past experiences, whether good or bad, and to fully inhabit the present moment. And think about us. How often do we carry the weight of past hurts, past failures, past successes even, into our present moment? We drag these ghosts behind us like Jacob Marley's chains, and then we wonder why we feel so burdened, so stuck. But what if we could truly move on? What if we could approach each moment with fresh eyes, unencumbered by the baggage of the past? What kind of life might we create then? You see, ignore, smile, and move on is not about passivity or resignation. It's about active engagement with life on life's terms. It's about discernment, joy, and flow. It's about recognizing the impermanence of all things and choosing to dance with that impermanence rather than resist it. Now, I can sense some skepticism in the room. Some of you might be thinking, this all sounds well and good, Alan, but how does it apply to my real-life problems? How does it help me pay my bills, deal with difficult relationships, or face serious health issues? And these are valid questions. After all, life isn't always a walk in the park, is it? We face real challenges, real pain, real struggles. But here's the thing. The philosophy of ignore, smile, and move on doesn't deny these realities. It simply offers us a different way of relating to them. Let's take a concrete example. Imagine you've just lost your job. Now, the conventional response might be to panic, to obsess over what went wrong, to worry incessantly about the future. And sure, these are natural reactions. But how do they serve you? Do they change the reality of your situation? Do they open up new possibilities? Now, let's apply a mantra. First, ignore. Not the fact that you've lost your job, of course, but ignore the tendency to catastrophize, to let your mind run wild with worst-case scenarios. Ignore the voice that says you're a failure, that you'll never find another job, that your life is over. These thoughts aren't reality. They're just stories your mind is telling you. Next, smile. Find something to be grateful for in this moment. Perhaps it's the support of your family, or the skills and experience you've gained, or simply the fact that you're alive and have the opportunity to start anew. Smile at the absurdity of life, at its unpredictability. Smile because in this moment of apparent loss, you're actually being handed an opportunity for growth and transformation. And finally, move on. Not in the sense of ignoring your responsibilities or the need to find new employment, but in the sense of not getting stuck in the story of loss and victimhood. Move on by taking practical steps towards your next opportunity. Move on by being open to new possibilities that you might not have considered before. You see, ignore, smile. And move on isn't about denying reality or avoiding responsibility. It's about choosing how we relate to our experiences, how we frame our narrative, how we navigate the ever-changing landscape of life. Now, some of you might be wondering, but Alan, isn't this just another form of positive thinking? Aren't we just putting on rose-colored glasses and pretending everything is fine when it's not? And it's a fair question. After all, we live in a world that's often trying to sell us on the idea that if we just think positively enough, all our problems will magically disappear. But that's not what we're talking about here. You see, positive thinking in its conventional form is often just another way of resisting what is. It's an attempt to overlay a veneer of positivity over our genuine experiences and emotions. And while it might provide temporary relief, it doesn't address the root of our discontent. What we're exploring here is something much deeper. It's not about pretending everything is fine when it's not. It's about recognizing that fine and not fine just concepts in our minds, labels we apply to our experiences based on our preferences and conditioning. The reality is, life simply is what it is. It's neither inherently good nor bad, neither inherently positive nor negative. It just is. And our suffering arises not from life itself, but from our resistance to it, our insistence. So when we say ignore, smile, and move on, we're not advocating for a superficial positivity. We're inviting a profound shift in perspective. We're suggesting that perhaps, just perhaps, we can learn to dance with life rather than wrestle with it. When you're dancing, you don't resist your partner's movements. Flow with them, you adapt, you improvise. Sometimes you lead, sometimes you follow. And in that dance, there's a kind of freedom, a kind of joy that can't be found in resistance. Life is very much like this dance. It's constantly moving. constantly changing, and we have a choice. We can resist these movements, clinging desperately to our idea of how things should be, or we can learn to move with them, to flow with the ever-changing rhythms of existence. Now, I can almost hear some of you thinking, but Alan, isn't this just a recipe for passivity? If we're always ignoring, smiling, and moving on, how do we ever stand up for what's right? How do we ever make positive changes in the world? Now, it's a brilliant question, really, because it gets to the heart of a common misconception about Eastern philosophy and spirituality in general. People often think that acceptance and non-resistance mean inaction or apathy, but nothing could be further from the truth. You see, true acceptance, the kind we're talking about when we say ignore, smile, and move on, actually empowers us to act more effectively in the world. Because when we're not caught up in resistance, when we're not wasting our energy fighting against what is, we have more resources available to create positive change. Have you ever tried to help someone who is in a state of panic or extreme anger? It's not very effective, is it? Their resistance to their current situation, their insistence that things should be different, actually prevents them from taking constructive action. But when we can accept what is truly deeply accepted, we create space. Space to see clearly. Space to respond rather than react. Space to act from a place of wisdom rather than fear or anger. So ignore, smile, and move on isn't about passivity at all. It's about creating the internal conditions that allow for more effective action. It's about conserving our energy, focusing our attention, and aligning ourselves with the flow of life so that our actions can have maximum impact. Let's take an example. Say you're an activist working to combat climate change. Now, you could approach this work from a place of fear, anger, and resistance. You could rage against the corporations, the governments, the individuals who are contributing, and sure, that anger might fuel you for a while. But what happens when you inevitably face setbacks? What happens when progress is slow or when you encounter opposition? If you're operating from a place of resistance, these challenges are likely to leave you feeling discouraged, burnt out, maybe even hopeless. But if you're approaching your work from the perspective of ignore, smile, and move on, things look quite different. You ignore the temptation to get caught up in despair or in demonizing those who disagree with you. You smile, finding joy in the work itself and in the community of like-minded individuals working towards a common goal. And you move on, continually adapting your strategies, learning from setbacks, and maintaining your commitment for the long haul. You see, this philosophy isn't about ignoring problems or pretending everything is okay when it's not. It's about choosing where to focus our energy, finding joy even in difficult circumstances, and maintaining the flexibility and resilience to keep moving forward no matter what. And isn't this ultimately what we need to create real, lasting change in the world? Not frantic activity born of fear and resistance, but sustained, joyful action aligned with the deepest currents of life itself. Now, I can sense that some of you are starting to get it. You're beginning to see how this simple mantra, ignore, smile, and move on, isn't just a cute saying, but a profound philosophy that can transform our entire experience of life. But I also sense that for others, there's still some hesitation. Perhaps you're thinking, this all sounds good in theory, Alan, but how do I actually put it into practice? And it's a fair question. After all, we're talking about a fundamental shift in how we relate to life, and that's no small thing. It's not something that happens overnight. It's a practice, a journey, a continual unfolding. So let's talk about some practical ways to embody this philosophy in our daily lives. And let's start with the first part. Ignore. Now, as we've discussed, this doesn't mean becoming oblivious or burying our heads in the sand. It means being discerning about where we place our attention. It means recognizing that not every thought that pops into our head deserves our engagement. Not every emotion needs to be indulged. Not every piece of news or gossip or drama needs our participation. One practical way to cultivate this skill is through meditation. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Oh, no, not another pitch for meditation, but bear with me. When we sit in meditation, we're not trying to stop our thoughts or control our mind. We're simply observing. We're watching thoughts arise and pass away without getting caught up in them. And as we practice this, we start to realize something profound. We are not our thoughts. We are the awareness in which thoughts arise. And this realization gives us a kind of freedom. We no longer have to believe every thought that pops into our head. We no longer have to react to every emotion that arises. Another practical technique is to regularly ask yourself, is this thought, Gregson, serving me right now? If the answer is no, if it's just creating unnecessary stress or anxiety without leading to any constructive action, then practice letting it go. Imagine it floating away like a balloon or dissolving like a cloud. Now let's move on to the second part of our mantra, smile. This might seem simple, but it's surprisingly powerful. You see, there's a feedback loop between our physical state and our mental state. When we smile, even if we don't feel particularly happy at first, it sends a signal to our brain that affects our mood. Set a reminder on your phone to smile several times throughout the day. And the reminder goes off, no matter what you're doing, take a moment to smile. Really feel the muscles in your face changing. Notice how it affects your mood, your posture, your overall sense of well-being. But remember, we're not talking about a fake, forced smile here. We're talking about finding genuine reasons to smile, no matter how small. Maybe it's the warmth of the sun on your face, or the taste of your morning coffee, or the sound of a child's laughter. Train yourself to notice these small joys, these little miracles that surround us all the time, but that we so often overlook. And finally, let's talk about how to put the move on part into practice. This is about cultivating a sense of flow, of non-attachment. One way to do this is to regularly remind yourself of the impermanence of all things. Everything is constantly changing, constantly in flux. Nothing lasts forever. Not our joys, not our sorrows, not our successes, not our failures. When you find yourself getting stuck, whether it's ruminating on a past hurt or worrying about a future scenario, gently remind yourself, this too shall pass, because it will. Another practical technique is to practice letting go in small ways throughout your day. Maybe it's letting someone else have the last word in an argument, or not insisting on having things done your way, or simply letting go of the need to always be right. You see, moving on isn't something we do once and then we're done. It's a continual process, a dance with the ever-changing nature of reality. And the more we practice it in small ways, the more natural it becomes in bigger situations. Now, I want to address something important here. Some of you might be thinking, but Alan, doesn't all this ignoring and moving on mean we're not fully engaging with life? Aren't we missing out on the depth of human experience? And it's a brilliant question, really, because it gets to the heart of a common misunderstanding about spiritual teachings. People often think that concepts like detachment or non-attachment mean becoming cold or indifferent, not caring about anything. That's not it at all, in fact. It's quite the opposite. When we practice ignore, smile, and move on, we're not disconnecting from life, we're actually connecting more deeply, more authentically. You see, when we're constantly caught up in our dramas, our worries, our need to control everything, we're not really present, we're living in our heads, in our stories about life, rather than in life itself. But when we learn to ignore the incessant chatter of our minds, to smile at the inherent joy and absurdity of existence, and to move on from our attachments, we create space to truly experience life as it is. And paradoxically, this ability to let go, to not cling, actually allows us to love more deeply, to care more genuinely. Because our love and care are no longer burdened by expectations, by the need for things to be a certain. We're free to love life, to love others, to love ourselves exactly as we are, exactly as everything is. Have you ever noticed how children can be totally absorbed in the present moment? They can be crying one minute and laughing the next. They don't hold grudges, they don't worry about the future. They simply experience each moment fully. And then they move on. In many ways, ignore, smile, and move on is about reclaiming this childlike ability to be fully present, fully engaged with life. Now, I can sense that for some of you this is starting to click. You're beginning to see how this philosophy could transform not just your own life, but your relationships, your work, your entire way of being in the world. But for others, there might still be some resistance. You might be thinking, this all sounds well and good, Alan, but what about real tragedy? What about serious loss or grief? Surely we can't just ignore, smile, and move on from these things. And you're absolutely right to ask this, because life does include suffering. It does include loss and grief and pain. And it would be glib and insensitive to suggest that we can or should simply brush these experiences aside. But here's the thing. Ignore, smile, and move on isn't about denying or suppressing our pain. It's about relating to it differently. It's about finding a way to be with our pain without being consumed by it. When we say ignore in the context of deep suffering, we're not talking about ignoring the pain itself. We're talking about ignoring the tendency to add layers of meaning and story on top of our pain. We're talking about ignoring the voice that says this shouldn't be happening, or I'll never be happy again, or life is unfair. Because you see, these thoughts, these stories we tell ourselves about our pain often cause us more suffering than the pain itself. They keep us stuck, trapped in a narrative of victimhood or despair. Instead, we can choose to be with our pain directly, to feel it fully, without the added layer of mental commentary. And in doing so, we often find that the pain itself is bearable. It's the resistance to the pain, the insistence that it shouldn't be there, that causes us so much suffering. And what about smiling in the face of tragedy? Well, again, I'm not talking about pasting on a fake grin and pretending everything is fine when it's not. We're talking about finding, even in our darkest moments, something to be grateful for, something to appreciate. Maybe it's the support of loved ones, or the kindness of strangers, or simply the fact that we're still breathing, still here, still part of this grand, mysterious dance of life. You see, joy and sorrow are not mutually exclusive. They can and often do coexist. And learning to hold both, to honor our pain while also remaining open to joy, is a profound spiritual practice. And finally, moving on. In the context of deep loss or grief, moving on doesn't mean forgetting or getting over it. It means allowing life to continue to flow. It means being willing to open our hearts again, to engage with life again, even as we carry our loss with us. Here's the truth. Life moves on whether we're ready or not. The sun continues to rise and set. The seasons continue to change. The world continues to turn. We can resist this movement, clinging desperately to the past, or we can choose to move with it, allowing it to carry us forward into whatever comes next. Now, I want to be clear. This is not easy. It's not a quick fix or a magic solution to life's problems. It's a practice, a journey, a way of being that we cultivate over time, and it requires courage, real courage, because it's often easier to stay stuck in our familiar patterns, even if they're causing us pain. It's often easier to blame others or circumstances for our suffering. It's often easier to numb ourselves or distract ourselves rather than facing life directly. But the path we're talking about here, the path of ignore, smile, and move on, is the path of the warrior. Not a warrior who fights against life, but a warrior who has the courage to embrace life fully in all its joy and sorrow, all its beauty and pain. And as we walk this path, something remarkable begins to happen. We start to experience a kind of freedom that we may never have known before. Freedom from the tyranny of our own minds, from the endless cycle of craving and aversion from the next. We begin to trust life more, begin to flow with it rather than against it. We begin to see that everything, absolutely everything, is part of the grand tapestry of existence. And we are not separate from it. We are it. And from this place of deep understanding, of profound connection with life itself, genuine compassion arises. Not the kind of compassion that's based on pity or on seeing others as separate from ourselves, but the kind of compassion that comes from recognizing our fundamental oneness with all of life. You see, when we truly embody ignore, smile, and move on, we're not just transforming our own lives. We're changing the way we interact with the world. We're bringing more peace, more joy, more love into every situation we encounter. Imagine a world where more people approached life this way. Imagine how different our personal relationships would be, our communities, our political discourse, our relationship with the natural world. This is the real power of ignore, smile, and move on. It's not just personal philosophy. It's a radical act of transformation that has the potential to ripple out and change the world. Now, I can sense that many of you are feeling inspired. You're excited about this new way of approaching life. But I can also sense some trepidation. You might be wondering, can I really do this? Can I really change the way I've been relating to life for so long? Yes, you can. But it's important to remember that this is a journey, not a destination. It's something we practice, something we cultivate over time. And like any practice, there will be moments of challenge, moments when we fall back into old patterns. There's the beautiful thing. Even those moments become opportunities for practice. When we catch ourselves getting caught up in mental drama, when we notice we've lost our smile, when we realize we've become stuck, these are all chances to practice, ignore, smile, and move on once again. And each time we do, we're strengthening new neural pathways. We're creating new habits of mind. We're gradually transforming our default way of being. And so be patient with yourself. Be kind to yourself. Approach this practice with a sense of curiosity and playfulness rather than grim determination. After all, if we can't smile at our own stumbles and missteps along the path, what can we smile at? Remember, too, that you're not alone on this journey. We're all in this together, all fumbling our way towards greater wisdom, greater peace, greater joy. And in that shared journey lies a profound sense of connection, of community. So I invite you, as you leave here today, to begin experimenting with this philosophy in your daily life. Start small. Perhaps choose one minor annoyance or worry that you typically get caught up in and practice ignoring it. Find one small thing each day to genuinely smile about. And practice moving on from one small attachment or grudge that you've been holding on to. As you do this, pay attention to how it feels. Notice the sense of spaciousness, of freedom that begins to open up in your life. Notice how your relationships change, how your work changes, how your entire experience of life begins to shift. And remember, this isn't about reaching some perfect state where you never worry, where you're always smiling, where you have no attachments whatsoever. That's not the goal, and it's not even desirable. We're human, after all, and our human experience includes the full spectrum of thought. The goal is simply to suffer less and to live more fully, to be more present, more engaged with life as it is rather than as we think it should be, to dance more gracefully with the ever-changing nature of existence. So, my friends, as we come to the end of our time together, I invite you to take a deep breath. Feel the air filling your lungs, nourishing every cell of your body. And as you exhale, imagine releasing all the unnecessary mental baggage you've been carrying, all the worries about the future, all the regrets about the past, all the judgments and creations. Just for this moment, ignore all of that. Smile at the simple miracle of being alive here and now, and prepare to move on into whatever comes next with an open heart and a quiet mind. Remember, life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. It's not a destination to reach, but a journey to be savored. And with the philosophy of ignore, smile, and move on, you have a powerful tool to navigate this journey with more grace, more joy, and more freedom than you may have ever thought possible. So go forth, my friends. Ignore what doesn't serve you. Smile at the inherent beauty and mystery of existence. And move on, always move on, flowing with the great river of life. For in this flow, in this dance, in this endless unfolding of now lies the secret to true peace, true joy, true fulfillment. Thank you for your attention, for your openness, and for your willingness to explore these ideas with me. May your journey be filled with wonder, with laughter, and with the profound peace that comes from aligning yourself with the deepest currents of life itself. Ignore smile and move on, my friends. Ignore smile and move on.